actually seeing it from the inside, and hearing colleagues on rape teams would say, oh, I wouldn't report it if it happened to me, which you think it's just unbelievable.
My opening memoir from a woman who went from working at an advertising agency to being a fully qualified police detective in just 9 months. The book is also about her experiences of misogyny and bullying inside the Met, and the troubled police force, from Greater London is facing greater scrutiny than ever. So this is a very timely book in a lot of ways. Jess McDonald, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jeff, how are you?
I'm good. Your book, No Comment, What I Wish I'd Known About Becoming a Detective, is out now. Just give me a brief sort of overview of the person you were before you joined the Met. What were you doing and where were you working?
Well, I'd had all the jobs, to be honest with you. So I'd worked in advertising, sales, finance. I'd worked as a carer. I'd done all kinds of things, and always kind of searching for the meaningful job that I wanted to kind of really stick at. And I looked into becoming I was fascinated by the law and the courts system in particular. So I looked into becoming a criminal barrister, and that's really expensive. So that was pretty prohibitive. And it was actually whilst I was doing some work experience in a Crown Court that I heard about this direct entry detective scheme. And I kind of thought, God, that's absolutely amazing to be able to go in, because it was all the investigation side that I was interested in. So to be able to basically go in, be trained up and thrown in, as it were, a bit like the Teach First scheme, you kind of learnt on the job. So I applied, not thinking for a minute I'd get the job. And lo and behold, I did. And so it's a book about kind of my experience of being, I guess, someone who's fascinated by true crime, that follows all the series, but suddenly gets to see it from the front line.
So that is where sort of interest came, sort of principally, was it the true crime genre and a general interest in the law and police work more generally?
Yeah, obsession for Line of Duty, all that kind of stuff. And I was a bit of a geek about going to Crown Court, so I used to go and sit in on trials and things. I did have this absolute fascination with it. And it just seemed, because it was quite a controversial scheme, still probably is, and it's quite a pioneering thing. Normally you'd have to go into the police and you'd be in uniform first, and if you wanted to go down the more investigative route, after a couple of years in uniform, you'd go across.
How many years would people normally be in uniform before they became a detective?
Well, it's kind of an optional thing. Not everyone would necessarily, because it's quite a different role. Because you don't do the response work, so it's not that high octane kind of work that being on response, for instance, is. It's kind of a lot slower, more methodical. It's kind of a different thing, but generally a couple of years, I'd say.
A couple of years. So
minimum,
So the inspiration came from fiction in terms of things like In the Line of Duty. How did the reality compare to what you were hoping to find?
Unsurprisingly, I mean, I was quite naive going in, but unsurprisingly, it was very different. But I think what we see on TV, you know that the reality is not exactly as what you see on TV. Obviously we all know that, but it was quite a stark contrast to all the stuff that you read about the police, to the stuff that you kind of see. The detective role is quite a mysterious one, because you don't really encounter that if you're just a member of the public, unless you are, I guess, arrested or you are a victim of a crime. So I wanted to write a book. It was going to be much more along the vein of Adam Kay's This Is Going to Hurt, kind of just showing people, I think he says, giving a peek behind the curtain or whatever.
And the thing that drove that book in a lot of ways was sort of, those stories and examples of things that people could identify with. Is there, I mean, obviously you've got lots, but is there one particular watershed moment that really was an eye-opener into what the force was really like?
Well, for instance, the book starts with us doing our training and all lining up to be sprayed in the face with CS gas to experience how that feels. And it's just these extreme things that we're encountering. And it starts off a lot lighter, and it starts off with things, maybe being a bit more bizarre. And because it is a fish out of water tale, it's kind of, everything's very, we don't have the natural muscle memory. It's quite counterintuitive, making arrests, doing these interactions with people. They're not things that you normally do. But yeah, it does take a bit of a turn for the darker as it goes on. But I kind of planned to write it before any of this stuff had happened, if that makes sense.
So what in particular about the CS gas spraying did you find sort of problematic or traumatic? I mean, obviously, the thing itself is not a good thing, but I'd imagine that's a general part of training, I guess, that goes with police work.
Yeah, I mean, it's a voluntary thing. You can do it or not, but it's a firearm. You know, it's illegal, obviously, in the UK. So it's used only it's kind of a tool of last resort. So you'd only use it if your life was like kind of under threat, or you know someone was about to cause you quite serious harm. So I personally found that I didn't really understand why we were being sprayed in the face with it, because I thought, well, I'm not gonna use it unless it's unless it's life or death kind of situation.
Yeah, I guess they may claim it's like a form of altitude training, but something that you're highly unlikely to face in your line of work. I mean, one thing that a lot we're concerned about, like most sort of reasonable people are concerned about, is the success of rape convictions and investigations. That's a particular concern for you, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So I actually ended up, once I was in the police, I was working in safeguarding, which is domestic violence, rape, but predominantly crimes against women. And yeah, it was really eye-opening, because I know that we read a lot about the low rape conviction rate. I think it's under 2% of rapes are prosecuted, which is obviously horrific. But actually seeing it from the inside, and you know, hearing colleagues on rape teams would say, "Oh, you know, I wouldn't report it if it happened to me," which you think it's just unbelievable. But there's a massive issue with the criminal justice system. It's not just the police side. I think the police are definitely scapegoated a lot at the moment, and there are definitely issues within the Met. But actually, in terms of the rape prosecution rate, that's much more to do with the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Services, charging standards. So their objectives and the police objectives are misaligned, and basically they want a realistic prospect of conviction. But with a crime like rape, you often do have the same story, but one person saying there's consent and another person saying there wasn't, and it's really tricky. But with that framework, they're not taking these cases to court, and that's criminal as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, the public will mostly be aware of these horrific cases like David Carrick and Wayne Couzens. And, you know, there's a cultural aspect of the Met, which you allude to, a particularly disturbing story about a male sergeant who spied on your friend in the shower. I mean, just how alarming is that, to be working in an environment and then you see what their next deployment is? I mean, how did that feel, and what liberty were you at to flag that kind of thing?
That was a huge shock, and that was actually before the atrocities of Wayne Couzens and David Carrick. David Carrick, what he'd done hadn't come to light anyway. So this was back, I think, in 2019 or 2020. And yeah, it was completely shocking, because it was police accommodation, and essentially it was 3 police officers. One was my friend, and the other 2, none of them had met each other, and we were all doing separate courses at Hendon, which is the police training school. And it was premeditated. The guy who he's been convicted of this sexual offence, and he's no longer a police officer, and he was convicted at Crown Court. So it's very much, this has happened and it's being dealt with. But he planned the order that they were going to have the showers, because there was a shared communal bathroom in this police accommodation. And while she was in the shower, she saw a phone in, you know, the old-fashioned kind of bathrooms where you have the window above the door. She saw a phone, and she came kind of bursting out, and she basically caught him red-handed, and he said, "Oh, I've deleted it." And if it wasn't for the other guy there, who was amazing and a really good police officer and jumped to action and kind of witnessed and heard the whole event, you know, I don't know. I don't know whether she would have taken further action, because he would have lied through his teeth. He lied through his teeth anyway to try to get away with it. And, you know, it was fortunate that there was another person there. but yeah, it was really shocking, unbelievably
I mean,
shocking.
everyone listening to that will be shocked. I mean, I was going to say,
Yeah,
was there a straw that broke the camel's back moment of you leaving? That could have been it. I'd imagine that there were others, but was there one particular moment when you thought, I have to get out of this environment?
just very quickly to add to that, I know I'm
Mm.
kind of ramble a bit, but he was about to join a rape team. I've forgotten that's quite a significant part of the story. The next day, within days, this particular sergeant, he did that to my friend. So yeah, that was deeply shocking. No, it's a bit more of a drip effect. Not being able to get justice for people. Again, particularly women who were kind of experiencing awful crimes and were reporting them, and there was quite good evidence for some of these things, but they weren't getting through this kind of break in the criminal justice system. I was bullied by two of my sergeants, which didn't help. I tried to raise that, and not a lot was done really. So yeah, it's kind of a cumulative effect. But the work also is like it's seriously intense. Like I want to stress, most police officers are great. They really are. Yes, there is a problem. There are some bad apples. There are some bullies, and they need to be rooted out. And I think that is Mark Rowley's objective now. The majority are great, and they're doing a really tough job. Like the amount of trauma you're exposed to, the sheer volume of the work, not enough people to do the work. It's relentless. It's really, really intense. I guess this is the case for most public services as well.
Well, what is the way forward then for the Met to change? Is there a way forward, and is it already happening?
I think for the following the Casey review, obviously the things that speak to my experience are, the bullying. I think Baroness Casey found from her review that 25% of women in the Met said they'd experienced bullying, which is really, really hard. Like quarter of women. So there's no doubt that's a huge issue. I think that's actually an issue in quite a lot of workplaces. And I've forgotten what the question was.
Well, it's about on. In a way, like a way forward for the Met. Does it exist, and is it already in process?
Yeah, I think so. I think there needs to be a really, really proactive drive to find bad apples and bullies. And I think there needs to be a proactive zero tolerance, not just zero tolerance if we hear about it. And if it gets into the news, an actual, at the end of the day, there's thousands of detectives in the Met. Like they should be able to pretty quickly find the people who are dodgy. It's not rocket science. You need a bit of an anonymous reporting system. You need to empower people to actually speak up, and there be meaningful consequences. But yeah, I think that's definitely the way forward, and then rebuild public trust. And because it's really sad that these few individuals, although still too many, are like tarnishing an entire organisation's reputation.
Yeah, I mean, let's hope that there is a positive way forward. And that was Jess McDonald. Thanks so much for being on the show. And her book, No Comment, What I Wish I'd Known About Becoming a Detective, is out now.